Let's head now to Zimbabwe, where the government has announced that it will roll out free education starting in 2023. Learners from underprivileged communities are slated to be the first beneficiaries of this state-funded basic education program. The number of schools that are set to benefit from the first phase could not be immediately established, as consultations with the stakeholders in the education sector are ongoing. The government has, however, firmly committed to rolling out the program next year.
Joining us this morning of part two on, of course, these developments in Zimbabwe is the Primary and Secondary Deputy Minister, Edgar Moyo. Good morning and thanks for joining us, Minister.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
How much has the government set aside for this program, and does it have the capacity to even fund the program?
Yeah, we have not yet set aside anything as yet. But the Ministry of Finance and other government agencies are already working on a package to cover that. What we are doing at the moment is that we are consulting on how we are going to roll out. The funding package is going to depend on how we want to roll it out. We are crafting and consulting stakeholders, and we want to check whether we'll be able to finance everybody at the same time, or whether we are going to finance in phases, and whether we are going to do the classification of our schools and fund according to the classification. So we are at a consultative stage, and then we may not at the moment say how much has been set aside, because that is going to largely depend on options that we have chosen.
Now, you've talked about how the government is trying to consolidate on how this will roll out. Let's talk about who will be eligible for this. Is this going to be available to every student, regardless of their background?
Well, like I said earlier, much of it is going to depend on the options that we're going to come up with. But naturally, we want to start off with the most underprivileged, and then moving upwards to those who have the capacity to fund themselves. But I can confirm that definitely we're starting next year, and the first group that we'll be looking at is largely going to be the underprivileged, those that are not employed, whose parents are not employed, those who have no capacity to raise fees to finance their education. That's going to be our priority. If resources permit, we may already start putting in those who might have the capacity. But then our first port of call is those that are hard hit economically.
Well, is this the first time that we're having Zimbabwe is having conversations about free education, or has it come up before? Because I remember I'm seeing here that it seems Mnangagwa had promised in 2018 free education, and now we're talking about it again. What do you remember, or can you speak on what made it not happen earlier? And of course, it seems like it's a new promise.
Right. This is not entirely a new promise. In fact, at independence in 1980, government rolled out free education, and it went on for the first 10, 12 years. And it was discontinued, I think, around 1991, 1992, during the advent of ESAP, the Economic Structural Adjustment Program, where then government wanted to recover costs and so forth. And it was part of the IMF prescriptions that cost recovery becomes the hallmark of government policy. So that's when it was discontinued. But however, 3 years ago, in 2018, 2019, government started off with a pilot program where 2 schools were chosen, 2 districts were chosen in the 10 provinces of the country, meaning that we have already 20 schools, primary schools, 20 secondary schools, where this is being rolled out already as a pilot to see how we can do it at a larger scale. So it's not just starting now. In fact, if I may also explain, the 2013 Constitution, Chapter 4 and Section 75, provides that the state shall progressively provide state-funded education. So it's not just coming out now, it's something that we've been preparing for.
Okay, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that the Constitution does provide for this. So you can categorically say that this is not some political statement made by, the ruling ZANU Patriotic Front to maybe score some points in the eyes of Zimbabweans.
Yes, can you come again?
I said, can you categorically say that? I mean, you have mentioned that this is provided for in the Constitution, but I'm asking if you can categorically say that this is also not a plot to sort of score points. I beg your pardon, a plot by the ZANU PF.
No. That has nothing to do with scoring points. In fact, like I've said, in 2013, the Constitution provided that the state shall progressively fund education. And this is part of the fulfillment of the constitutional provision so that access to education is not inhibited by costs. In fact, we do not want costs of education to be a barrier to access to education. Okay. So it has nothing to do with scoring points, but fulfilling the constitutional provisions.
I will look forward to these provisions being fulfilled as well.
Yeah, I want to just quickly also chip in a quick one here, if you can respond to this in 20 or 30 seconds max. Teachers and health workers, have given a notice of a strike on the 18th of July. How is the same government who, of course, is having challenges with paying teachers offering free education?
Right. The issue of salaries is dealt with by the National Joint Negotiating Council. And government's role is to spread the resources so that all our resources do not just go for salaries, but rather to cover safety nets for the whole population. So we are balancing up these things so that we don't just use money for salaries, but rather for everything else. But what I would want to say is that government is very much concerned about the welfare of its workers and is progressively, like if you can look at the trail, what has happened so far, is that meetings have taken place and some offers have been made. Yes, they've been rejected, but negotiations about finding a common ground, finding the center, is not about pulling one end to the other.
All right. Minister Edgar, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's an ongoing conversation, and they're very important conversations over there in Zimbabwe. We look forward to seeing you again, hopefully, with updates on that story.